I want to start today with a question that honestly feels a little bit ridiculous to ask out loud. It's almost like asking, is water wet?
I love those kinds of questions because usually the answer isn't as simple as we think. What is it?
The question is, why does it matter if we believe a victim of abuse?
Okay, yeah, I see why you think that sounds ridiculous.
Right. Because the answer just seems so obvious. I mean, on a human level, we aren't robots. If you tell me something traumatic and I just roll my eyes, I'm just being a jerk.
Of course,
We think validation is good and invalidation is bad. It feels entirely emotional.
that's the common assumption, yeah. We think
Oh,
of
sure.
belief as a form of, kindness or empathy, like giving someone a hug.
Exactly. But as I was reading through the stack of research you sent over for this deep dive, and we are talking some heavy hitters today, criminology papers, government reports,
Yeah, the works?
it just hit me that belief isn't just about feelings. It's not about being nice.
No, not at all. It's structural.
It's mechanical. I started picturing the justice system like this giant, complex engine. You know, you have the police gears, the court gears, the protection order gears,
Mhm.
but belief. That's the starter motor. If that one gear doesn't turn, the rest of the machine, no matter how well designed, just sits there. It's dead in the water.
That is the perfect way to frame it. And when that engine fails to start, people don't just get their feelings hurt.
No.
They get trapped. They stay in danger.
So that's our mission today. We are going to look at why that starter motor fails so often, specifically when it comes to coercive control.
Right.
And just to be clear, because we hear that term a lot, we aren't talking about the stranger jumping out of a bush scenario, are we?
No, and that distinction is absolutely vital. Coercive control is a pattern of behavior. It's in a relationship partner's family. It involves psychological harm, financial control, isolation.
It's a methodical removal of someone's personhood.
It's not necessarily a bruise, it's a cage.
We've got sources from the criminologist Nils Christie all the way to modern data on how police respond to non-physical violence. We're going to uncover why victims of coercive control are so systematically disbelieved. And we're going to look at this terrifying concept called the legitimacy threshold.
It's a heavy stack, but it explains so much about why the system just looks the way it does.
So let's dive in. To understand why we don't believe certain victims, you highlighted a concept from the 80s that I found fascinating. It's called the ideal victim.
Yes. Mills Christie, 1986. This is a foundational text in criminology.
Now, when I read ideal victim, I immediately thought of like a movie trope. We all have this image in our heads.
Describe it. What's the movie playing in your head right now?
Okay, so it's a thriller, it's night. A woman is walking to her car after, I don't know, volunteering at a soup kitchen.
And she's doing something good, right?
She's small, she's innocent, she's minding her own business. Suddenly, this giant masked man, a total stranger, attacks her. She fights back, but she gets hurt. The police arrive, they see the bruises, they see the masked guy running away, and they immediately slap the cuffs on him and wrap a blanket around her. Justice is served.
That is exactly what Christie was talking about. He argued that society, and, by extension, the legal system, has this subconscious checklist for who counts as a legitimate victim.
It's literally a checklist.
Essentially, yeah. Christie identified 5 criteria. 1, the victim is weak. 2, they are carrying out a respectable project, like your soup kitchen example.
Okay.
3, they're in a place where they couldn't possibly be blamed for being.
So not a dive bar at 2 in the morning.
Exactly. 4, the offender is bad and a stranger. And 5, the offender is big and powerful.
Okay, so if you tick those 5 boxes, the machinery of justice actually works.
Generally, yes. The police believe you, the prosecutor takes the case, the jury feels sympathy, you fit the mold, it makes everyone feel safe because we can all say, oh, that was a monster, I'm safe because I'm not near a monster.
But here's the problem, and I think I see where this is going. Coercive control seems to break every single one of those rules.
It violates almost all of them. I mean, think about it. Coercive control happens behind closed doors.
In the victim's own home.
So rule 3, being in a safe place, that's gone. Home is supposed to be safe.
And it's not a stranger, it's your husband, your wife, your boyfriend.
Right. So the offender isn't unknown.
Hmm.
And so often, there are no visible physical marks. The weapon isn't a fist. It's a shared bank account password. It's the GPS tracker on a phone. It's a whisper that says, if you leave, I'll kill the dog.
That's terrifying. It's like you said, it's turning down the volume on someone's life instead of smashing it with a hammer.
That's a haunting way to put it. The harm isn't a broken bone, it's the absence of freedom. But here's the challenge for the system. how do you photograph the absence of freedom?
You can't. You can't show a jury a bruise if the injury is that you haven't been allowed to see your mother in 6 months.
Precisely. So because these victims don't look like the movie version, they aren't bleeding, they know their attacker, they don't get ideal victim status. They get skepticism.
It really feels like the system is set up to solve simpler crimes. Like, man A hit man B, that's easy.
Right.
But man A systematically eroded the confidence of woman B over 10 years. That's just a lot harder to prosecute.
It is. And the research suggests this isn't just about the type of crime, but also who's reporting it. I want to bring in the study by Zempy about the hierarchy of victimization.
Right, because the ideal victim isn't just about the crime, it's about the person themselves.
The ideal victim is usually, implied to be white, cisgendered, heterosexual, and middle class.
So if you don't fit that demographic,
You start lower on the ladder. Zempy's research shows that marginalized groups, LGBTQIA plus individuals, people with mental health struggles, Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander peoples, they struggle immensely to be seen as ideal.
there was a phrase in the notes that really stuck with me, that these groups are often over-policed as problems, but under-policed as victims.
That's the reality. I mean, imagine a trans woman calls the police because her partner's financially controlling her. When the police arrive, they might not see a victim.
Right.
They might see a marginalized person who they already view with some bias. They might see drama or lifestyle issues instead of a crime.
So when they call for help, they might be treated as a nuisance or worse, even as the perpetrator.
Precisely. If you're already viewed with suspicion and then you claim to be a victim of a crime that leaves no physical evidence, well, the barrier to belief becomes incredibly high. You're trying to start that engine with a totally dead battery.
It seems like we force people to be perfect before we agree to help them.
We do. And that leads us right into the mechanic of how the investigation actually falls apart. Let's say you aren't the ideal victim. You walk into a police station. What happens then?
This brings us to the legitimacy threshold. This concept came from Ewan in 2020. And honestly, reading this part just made me angry.
It's incredibly frustrating. Ewan found that when a victim doesn't fit the mold, the investigation shifts. It stops being about the suspect. It stops being, what did the abuser do?
And it becomes, is this person lying?
Is this victim credible? Are they reliable? Are they stable? The spotlight just turns 180 degrees and burns the victim.
That seems like such a massive waste of resources. Instead of investigating the crime, they're investigating the person who's reporting it.
Well, from their perspective, they need to know if they have a solid witness, right?
Sure, but here's the aha moment from the research. There's a circular trap that is specific to coercive control. And once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Oh, this part.
I read this 3 times to make sure I got it because it's just so maddening. Walk us through it.
Okay, so just imagine the effects of coercive control. You're living in constant fear, you're being gaslit, you're sleep deprived. What does that actually do to a person?
It makes you a wreck. You'd be anxious, confused, maybe paranoid. You might have trouble remembering dates because your brain is just in survival mode.
Correct. And you might stay in the relationship because you're financial dependent or, just terrified of leaving.
Those are the symptoms of the abuse. That is the injury.
Yes, but the legal system often looks at those exact responses and uses them as evidence that you are not credible.
Wait, so if I'm confused about the timeline because I've been gaslit for 5 years.
The police officer writes down, witness is inconsistent, narrative is confused, unreliable.
And if I stay in the house because he threatened to burn it down if I left?
They ask you, well, if it was so bad, why didn't you leave? You must be exaggerating.
That's the trap. The injury caused by the abuse is used to prove the abuse didn't happen.
Exactly. Iwan's research highlights this perfectly. The barriers to seeking help, the fear, the confusion, the attachment to the abuser are twisted into reasons to doubt the story. It's a catch-22. You're acting like a victim of trauma, therefore you aren't a credible witness.
It's like telling someone with a broken leg they can't go to the hospital because they aren't walking fast enough to get to the ambulance.
That's a very apt analogy. If your leg was really broken, you'd have run here sooner. It makes no sense, but that's the logic so often applied.
And the result of this trap is silence. We have a statistic here from Taylor, 2020, that is just devastating.
Lay it on us.
Over 42% of victims don't report to the police. Not because they don't want to, but because they aren't sure a crime was even committed.
42%, nearly half.
Yes. They've internalized the ideal victim myth so deeply that they gaslight themselves. They think, well, he didn't hit me. There's no blood. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe this isn't a police matter.
They talk themselves out of their own reality because their reality doesn't match that movie version we talked about.
Correct. And I want to pause here because this is so crucial. Just because there are no bruises, just because the victim isn't reporting, that does not mean they are safe.
No, the sources were very clear on this. I was looking at the Dichter study from 2018.
What did they find about the danger levels?
Dichter found that despite the lack of physical marks, women experiencing coercive control, sexual, psychological, and most terrifyingly, coercive control is the single biggest predictor of intimate partner homicide.
So these invisible chains are often the deadliest ones.
Yes. And failing to believe these victims isn't just a social faux pas or a bureaucratic annoyance. It leaves them in the path of a train that is coming to kill them.
So we've talked about the courts, the police, the legitimacy threshold. I want to shift gears to what happens inside a person's head. Because when you reach out for help, which is already the hardest thing to do,
Incredibly hard.
and the system slaps your hand away,
Yeah.
that has a cost.
It absolutely does. The literature calls it secondary victimization. It's defined in the research by Wexler.
Okay, break that down. Primary versus secondary.
Primary victimization is the abuse itself, the control, the fear, the insults. Secondary victimization is the harm caused by the system, the police, social workers, the courts, when they are insensitive or dismissive or disbelieving.
So it's the system piling on. It's the referee joining the other team and kicking you while you're down.
And the numbers are just stark. In studies on women reporting violence, 65% experienced secondary victimization.
Wow, that's the majority. So you're actually more likely than not to get hurt by the people who are supposed to be helping you.
And the psychological impact is measurable. As a result of that treatment, 87% felt bad about themselves. 89% felt violated by the system.
Violated, that's a strong word.
It is. But if you open up your most vulnerable wounds to a police officer and they look at you with skepticism and ask why you didn't leave sooner, that feels like a violation. It feels like a betrayal.
And here's the statistic that connects right back to that circular trap we just talked about. 80% were reluctant to seek help again.
80%. So let's play that out. You summon all this courage to go to the station. You overcome the fear. You face the skepticism. You get sent home because you aren't ideal. There's an 80% chance you will never, ever ask for help again.
You just retreat into silence.
And that silence is where the abuser wins. The perpetrator relies on isolation. They want you to feel like no one will believe you. So when the system says, "We don't believe you," the system is essentially collaborating with the abuser.
That is a heavy thought. The police becoming unwitting accomplices, and the research mentions internalized blame.
Yes. This is the final twist of the knife. The victim blaming from the outside morphs into self-blame on the inside. It's a psychological defense mechanism.
Oh, so? I mean, why would someone blame themselves?
Well, if the world is a just place and the police are the good guys and they say, "I'm not a victim," then the problem must be me. A victim might think, "I'm a strong person. Strong people don't get abused. So if this is happening, it must be my fault."
It prevents them from identifying the danger they're in. It's almost like the system is gaslighting them alongside the abuser.
It mirrors the abuse dynamic perfectly. And that's why secondary victimization is so damaging. It confirms the victim's worst fear, that they are crazy, that they are alone, and that no one is coming.
Okay. I feel like we've stared into the abyss here. It is bleak, but we promised a deep dive, not just to dive into despair. We need to look at solutions. If the engine is broken, how do we fix it? What do the sources say?
Well, the fix requires a pretty fundamental shift in the investigative lens. We have to flip the script entirely.
But how?
Currently, the system asks, is this victim believable? Or why didn't they leave?
Which puts all the scrutiny on the survivor. The victim is basically on trial.
Right. The sources suggest we need to stop asking that and start asking, what pattern of behavior did the perpetrator use to maintain power?
That's a subtle shift, but it sounds really important. Explain the difference in, like, a real-world scenario.
If I look at you, the victim, I see a mess of trauma responses. Crying, numbness, confusion. It's hard to read. But if I look at the perpetrator, I see a strategy. I see the texts. I see the bank statements. I see the isolation tactics.
The perpetrator's behavior is the constant.
Exactly. The victim's reaction can vary, some fight, some freeze. But the perpetrator's investment in control is usually quite calculated and consistent. You look for the invisible chains, not the bruises.
So instead of asking, why is she crying, you ask, what happened to make her cry?
Or even better, what rules have been set in this house? Who controls the money? Who tracks the car? You investigate the cage, not the bird.
Investigating the cage, I like that. It removes the pressure from the person who is already suffering. So for someone listening who might be in this situation or knows someone who is, what is the practical advice?
Documentation is crucial. This is the bridge between the invisible and the visible. Even if a victim isn't ready to report yet, the sources emphasize keeping a record.
What kind of record? Diary.
A diary, a hidden note on a phone, emailing yourself. Dates, times, messages, specific incidents. On Tuesday, he took my car keys. On Friday, he transferred all the money out of our joint account.
Because one of those things on its own might sound like just a domestic squabble.
Exactly. One isolated incident of checking a phone might not look like a crime to a jury, but 500 incidents over a year, that's a cage. Documentation is what reveals the cage. It turns he said, she said into he said the data says.
And you shouldn't just rely on general police, right? They're specialists.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In Australia, for example, there's 1800 Respect. In the UK and the US, there are domestic violence hotlines and specialized advocacy groups. These people are trained to see the invisible signs.
They've updated their software. They aren't running on the 1986 ideal victim canon.
No, they understand that trauma affects memory. They don't look for the perfect victim. They look for the reality of the control. Finding the right support system can be the difference between giving up and getting justice.
So what does this all mean? We started by asking why belief matters.
And we found that it's not just about kindness. Belief is a tool. It's an investigative necessity. If we misunderstand coercive control because we're clinging to this old myth of the stranger in the alley, we're just failing to uphold justice.
We've moved from the myth of the perfect victim to the harsh reality of the legitimacy threshold. We've seen how the system traps people using their own trauma against them, and we've looked at the devastating stats on secondary victimization.
And we learned that the invisible nature of coercive control doesn't make it less dangerous. It makes it harder to survive without that external belief.
It really highlights that we need to update our own internal software on what danger looks like. We need to stop looking for the monster under the bed and start recognizing the monster holding the remote control.
We do. And if I could leave our listeners with one thought, it would be this. We often demand that victims prove they're innocent of lying, of exaggerating, before we agree to help them. But what would our society look like if we stopped analyzing the victim's reaction to trauma and started analyzing the perpetrator's investment in control?
That is a powerful place to leave it. Stop looking at the bird, look at the cage. Thank you for guiding us through this.
My pleasure. It's a tough topic, but a really essential one.
And thank you for listening to this deep dive. Take care of yourselves, check on your friends, and we'll see you next time.